What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Today starts our 2024 NFL draft coverage on this podcast in earnest. If you listened to last week's episode, you know we got a little bit too in the weeds on the draft stuff on what was supposed to be our final March Madness episode. So we started a little bit, but we're really diving in headfirst today. Matt is going to join me in just a moment to talk about the quarterbacks in this draft class and the biggest debate of the class so far, who should be QB2 and maybe QB3. We're also going to talk about the wide receiver class today because this is the best wide receiver class that we've seen in quite some time. It is loaded at the top and then depth all throughout. Like there are lots of incredible options. So we're going to talk about the top three in depth today, and then maybe a couple other guys that we really like as well. And then next week, next Thursday, is the My Guys podcast, one of the best podcasts of the year. You do not want to miss that one. Before we bring in Matt and get started, I do want to say congratulations to the UConn men's basketball team and the South Carolina women's basketball team for winning their respective college basketball national championships. We're not going to go over college basketball for a while until March Madness next year. Actually, we kind of take that as a break leading into the NFL draft. So it's going to be draft coverage for the next 6 episodes, maybe even more, depending on how this draft goes. But I do have a lot of thoughts about the women's college basketball national championship specifically. One thought I did want to share is I keep seeing this thought that, Caitlin Clark is this amazing transformational player who's going to go to the WNBA next season. And there are a lot of analysts and a lot of sports writers who have come out and said, don't just pay attention to Caitlin Clark. There are a lot of other fantastic women in college basketball and in the WNBA who deserve your attention too. And I 100% agree with that statement. But the thing I don't agree with is that all these other amazing women need to be at odds with Caitlin Clark because she is a generational player who's going to redefine the game. One of the awesome things about having a player like Caitlin Clark come into the WNBA is that she's a huge draw. I mean, just look at the women's national championship, got 18.7 million viewers. It was the most viewed basketball game of the last 5 years at any level, including the NBA finals. And when you have a draw like that, you get eyes on not only Caitlin Clark, but all these other incredible women who are playing at a high level as well. Like before this season, I don't think that a lot of people knew who any of these amazing female college basketball players are. Like Cameron Brink, who's going to go into the WNBA, Angel Reese playing for LSU, Haley Van Lith. Like all of these other women are now getting attention because people came to watch Caitlin Clark, but they stay for the amazing basketball that's played by a lot of people. Now, as Caitlin goes into the WNBA, this is a transformational opportunity, not just for her, but for the WNBA as a whole. Like this is a league that just became profitable within the last 5 years, and viewership has been going up, but they've never done numbers anywhere close to what the NCAA just did in Caitlin Clark's last 3 games. And if you think it's more the NCAA basketball than Caitlin Clark, I would challenge you to look at the Final Four game that Caitlin Clark did not play in, the game that did 7 million, as opposed to the one Caitlin Clark played in against UConn that did about 14 to 15 million, double the numbers. So her going into the WNBA is going to generate a lot of interest. It's going to get a lot of eyes on the sport, and it's going to get attention for these amazing female basketball players who are in the WNBA and have been blazing this trail that Caitlin's going to walk. So I understand some of the pressures and some of the issues that people have with Caitlin Clark fans and kind of some of the racial undertones to this type of stuff. But I don't think that you need to be at odds with the people who come to watch Caitlin Clark. You don't need to gatekeep the WNBA and say, like, oh, you're just a Caitlin Clark fan, you can't come watch this sport, because the people that come to watch her are going to be watching all these other amazing women as well. And they're going to fall in love with the game, and it's going to draw popularity to your sport. And it's beneficial for everybody, not just for Caitlin. So that was my big overarching takeaway, is that like this is a moment her getting drafted and playing her first WNBA game is a moment, and the WNBA needs to capitalize on it because this is your chance to really transform the sport and make it a lot bigger than it's ever been. I have a lot of other thoughts on the women's college basketball national championship and Caitlin Clark going to the NBA, but that was really the big one I wanted to share. If you guys really want to hear more of what I think about it, reach out to us, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. We can talk about it. We can have a little conversation. Or if we get enough feedback, I'll do a whole WNBA podcast for you guys. I'll drop all my thoughts on the WNBA and women's college basketball. But definitely a moment right now. Like, this is the most attention women's basketball has gotten, I think, in my lifetime. So almost 34 years. And they deserve it. Because again, a lot of great players. And another one in Caitlin Clark's going to join the ranks and get attention for all these other women who deserve it. So with that said, let's talk NFL draft. This is our favorite time of year leading up to the NFL draft here in Detroit, where I live. Matt and I are going to go. It's going to be awesome. But first, we got to talk about it. So let's get Matt and let's go. Matt is here, ready for our first official NFL draft podcast for the 2024 NFL draft. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
I'm ready. We've been waiting for this for quite a while.
If I wait any longer to have in-depth draft conversations with you, I might explode. I'm surprised I made it this long. I was saying in the intro that we were supposed to wait till this week to start talking about the draft, and we couldn't even wait because our last March Madness episode was half draft.
It actually surprised me, and it's probably good for the podcast that we weren't having these conversations all week, because just that little disagreement that we had which really broke down to what? No, hell no. Brandon Ayuk's not up that high. Maybe I'd have Stephon Diggs a little bit higher. Really not big things, but we were both just what the fuck?
I sent you all of the stuff that we're not going to cover in this podcast this week to keep me from talking to you about the quarterbacks. Because that is the first thing we're going to talk about. So this podcast is was going to be the big debates and the big topics of this draft. I think the two biggest things of this draft, one, there are a lot of quarterbacks who are probably going to go in the first 3 rounds. And it's a big debate. The biggest debate of the quarterbacks right now is who is QB2.
Yeah.
The other big storyline of this draft is that this is the best wide receiver draft that we've seen in over 20 years.
Yep.
And I know people can go oh, well, the 2019 turned out pretty good. But I'm not talking about how things turned out. I'm talking about coming into the draft, the level of prospects that we're seeing, not only the elite level prospects at the top of the wide receiver class, but the depth throughout and how good. I mean, there's legitimately 10 guys who could be high level NFL players.
Yeah.
In this wide receiver class, maybe more. And then there's other guys who are you're going to hear from 15 to 20 of these wide receivers in this draft in their careers. It's very deep. There's a lot of talent. So those are the two main topics. And then at the end, we're going to do a little Homer corner today to talk about what we want the Patriots and the Lions, our two favorite teams, to do in this draft. So let's start off with the quarterback talk, because I'm guessing, typically our podcasts are 60 minutes. I'm guessing this is going to be between 80 and 85, and that 75 of it is going to be about quarterbacks. So at this point, it's April 10th. It's all but guaranteed that Caleb Williams, the quarterback out of USC, is going to be the number 1 overall pick in this draft to the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
The Bears will use all 10 minutes on the clock to announce that pick, even though we've known for weeks and some of us have known for years that this was coming. So then we get to the number 2 pick, which is the Washington Fighting Georges. They traded away their quarterback, Sam Howell, earlier this offseason, leaving them with Marcus Mariota and Jeff Driscoll. It is extremely obvious at this point that Washington will draft a quarterback, but the question is, who will that quarterback be? It seems that there are, I want to say, three options. Maybe we can call it two and a half. Drake Maye, the quarterback out of North Carolina, Jayden Daniels, the quarterback from LSU, and my one, maybe a half, is that there's a lot of rumors, a lot of smoke about JJ McCarthy being in the conversation as well, the quarterback from Michigan. Matt, my question to you to start this conversation about quarterbacks, if let's say you're the Washington Fighting Georges, patent pending, you're on the clock at number 2. Who are you taking? Spencer Rattler.
I mean, yeah, obviously. That's it. There we go.
Done. Podcast over. Saved us 80 minutes.
If you had asked me this 2 weeks ago, I would have had a much easier time answering that question. Just the more I've looked at Jayden Daniels, I think he's closed that gap a lot more for me. And I think this really comes down to like how much faith do you have in your staff to fix things? Because if you're telling me that you are comfortable with your quarterback coach and your offensive coordinator to set up your quarterback for success, I'm taking Drake Maye. There are some misses on tape that have happened consistently over the last 2 years that do raise some eyebrows for Drake Maye. There are misses that like not you didn't even see from Kenny Pickett last year. Those are a little bit concerning, and that's part of why that gap has like narrowed a little bit for me too. But like so much of that to me too is like it's very clear that his footwork is bad. But footwork is teachable. You can't teach his size, his speed, the arm talent, like because for every throw that you're like, what the hell was that he just made? There's him like lasering in a post that he had no business lasering in there. And like, it's not like he's had like great receivers this year. He really didn't have much of a supporting cast this year. Where are you at?
First of all, I just want to say that I called this with Jayden Daniels.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you would be higher on him specifically, but when the college football season ended, it was very clearly like there was this very clear tier of players, and it was Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, and Marvin Harrison Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And I said right after the season ended, I was like, Jayden Daniels is going to make an extremely strong push to be the number 2 quarterback off the board.
Yeah.
People are going to see what he did last year at LSU. And at the time, I thought he would like run in the combine. He didn't, but I was like, people are going to see like the speed and the athleticism, and they're going to be like, holy shit, this is taller Lamar Jackson, the dude who just won the MVP.
Yep.
That said, I am all aboard the Drake Maye hype train. I'm all in on Drake Maye being QB2 in this class because of the things you mentioned. All of the things that are problems are teachable.
Yeah.
It's footwork, mechanics, he's a little uncomfortable in the pocket.
Yep.
Especially like if he gets instant pressure, he's actually pretty good at avoiding it and shifting and making off-platform throws. But if he gets stuck in that pocket for too long and guys aren't coming open, that's when he starts getting like happy feet and kind of either hero balls it or like, he starts making negative plays. He's not super comfortable as the play develops. But I just think Drake Maye overall is the classic, we've had way too much time with this prospect guy. because for 2 years we've been looking at this draft class and saying, oh my God, Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, and Marvin Harrison Jr. are
Yep.
in this draft class. And what's been said about Drake Maye that I agree with is that in almost any other draft class, he would be the number one overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason he's not going to be is because Caleb Williams is just that damn good.
Yeah.
And I don't want to spoil things, but we're going to talk about Caleb Williams a lot on next week's podcast. So I'll leave him out of this. But Drake Maye is prototypical size, like just prototype everything. If you were going to make an NFL QB in a lab, you would come out with Drake Maye. He's like, kind of looks like this Justin Herbert, Josh Allen type of player.
Mm-hmm.
But I 100% understand the allure of Jayden Daniels. This guy threw 40 touchdowns. I think only 3 or 4 interceptions last year at LSU. Ran for another 1,000 yards and another 10 touchdowns. Like, Jayden Daniels makes plays on the ground that no other quarterback in this draft class can make.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue no other quarterback who is alive right now, aside from Lamar Jackson, can make the plays that Jayden Daniels can make on the ground. He is that explosive, that elusive. The running ability is spectacular. But I have 2 big concerns with Jayden Daniels. I'd be really interested to see what you think of these. One is the arm strength and the ability to fit balls in tight windows in the short and the medium range.
Mm-hmm.
You got a really pretty deep ball.
Yep.
Really good deep ball. But so like it's like 2 different types of arm strength. It's like there's the ability to throw the deep ball, which he has in spades.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It's this like fitting things in tight windows in the intermediate is an issue.
Do you have the fucking Matt Stafford laser sidearm slant in you?
Yes.
Right? Like,
and I know Drake Maye has both of those things. I know he can chuck it deep. I know that Drake Maye can fucking laser that thing in.
Yeah.
He makes throws that he has no business making.
Mm-hmm.
My other Jayden Daniels concern is he's slight. Like he has a slight frame.
Yeah.
And the hits that this guy takes on film are, oh my God. Like someone has to teach him to not take these hits.
So that's something that came up for me too. And it's like all of these athletic quarterbacks that have come out in the last several years don't really see those guys take big hits. They don't. They have that just little extra whatever it is to like make sure that they don't take the big hit. And that is one of those things where I'm not saying it's not coachable, but I don't know if it is.
If he's my quarterback, and there's an extremely good chance that one of the 2 dudes we're talking about right now is going to be my quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't want to be too negative on them, because no matter what happens, I'm going to do a complete 180 and just be like, Jayden Daniels is the greatest fucking quarterback prospect we've ever seen if he gets drafted to the Patriots. But I just feel like if Jayden Daniels was my quarterback, he's the guy that you're watching the game and you're just like, oh, fuck, our season's over. Oh, God. Oh, God. And then he gets up and you're like, oh. And then he takes another one and you're like, oh, God, our season's over. Like, it's just a roller coaster.
There's another thing for me too here with Jayden Daniels, and like at its core, it kind of comes back to like the same thing that I'll be talking about with JJ McCarthy. It's like, okay, your entire offense was built around like, we are going to run slot fades with our 2 super awesome receivers, and on top of it, this is college football where the hash marks are wider. So you have neighbors running with basically half of the field, and you just have this giant area to throw the ball to, and nobody's going to be able to defend that. it's interesting because in a way, it's like the coaches set up Jayden Daniels for both success and failure with that at the same time. But like they were trying to win games and they did it. Uh so but when it comes back to really when I'm analyzing it is like, the questions that you were saying you have, it comes it's really about like, okay, we don't have any production in the middle of the field. Is this just because you didn't have to, or is it because you can't? We're not going to get that answer until fall, right?
It's such a good question too, because like this is the same thing about JJ McCarthy.
Yeah,
Is it's
yep,
like, can you do it? And
yeah,
how high of a pick am I willing to spend to find out the answer to that question?
yeah. It's wild, but like with both of these guys, like if you hit, you're hitting big.
Yeah.
You're hitting on a guy who will most likely be a top five quarterback if they can like cash in on the physical potential that they have.
Well, this is the thing that's so alluring about Jayden Daniels is that he has an aspect to his game that nobody else in this draft class has, right? Is the running ability. And it's this like Lamar Jackson.
Yeah,
Oh, you
yeah.
you
It
drop
like
back and it's not there, and all of a sudden you're running for a
yeah,
70-yard touchdown.
like Caleb, Drake, JJ, they can all run. Even like you don't see him do it as much, but he's still a better athlete than you expect. Bo Nix, like they can all run, but they can't run.
No,
They're not breaking a 60-yarder.
I mean, Caleb Williams to a much higher degree than Drake May. They have like the functional mobility that's required from today's quarterbacks,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't be. And my worry about Penix, who we're not going to talk about a ton today,
Mm-hmm.
and not that I don't like Penix, but my worry about Penix is that he's like a statue, right? I mean,
Yeah, he's not
not like a
he
Kyle
does not
Trask statue,
appear
but
to athletically recovered very well from the injuries that he sustained earlier in his college career.
yeah, because like at
Which is a
Indiana, he ran.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you could combine those two things, then we would be talking very much more seriously about him higher up in this draft for me. But
You know what he reminds me of, and this is the worst comp of the entire draft season, is
hmm,
that like Penix is like the Tom Brady type of quarterback who has like some mobility, but like it's not like the Patrick Mahomes, like, oh, I'm in trouble. I'm gonna get out of this trouble right now.
yeah, that's funny. For me, the what you're going for if you're drafting Michael Penix is like, oh, we're going for Geno Smith, but we want him to get to where he is faster.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a good one, actually. I didn't think of that one.
depending on how the board falls, I don't necessarily think it will fall in a way that will entice them to do it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up with Seattle because of that contract situation.
It's just like Geno, Sam Howell, and Michael Penix next year.
Yeah,
That's a
I mean,
QB room.
like they have to figure out a successor because I do not expect them to be like, yeah, we're gonna franchise tag Geno Smith and they're not
Mm.
gonna give him a big deal.
They're like, hey, Geno, here's $40 million for next year.
Yeah, no, they don't want to do that. So like I wouldn't be surprised if they try to find that solution in this draft. Sam Howell is certainly a potential contingency plan, but and like I'm a Howell apologist. Like I like Sam Howell a lot, but that
Actually,
can't be the only iron in the fire.
I like Sam Howell too. And we talked about on the podcast this year about how he was sacked more than any other quarterback in the league.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd been sacked like 40 times through like 6 games or something
Yep.
crazy. And he was under all that pressure and like still was like leading the league in passing yards at one point
Yeah.
this season. And I was like, if I was Washington and I had the number 2 pick, I I might have still kept Sam Howell. And I get like you're like, oh, we're gonna draft our franchise quarterback, and this is like our new direction forward and all that stuff. But like, I think there's something there with Sam.
Hmm.
Is it like high level starting quarterback play? Who knows? But you kind of gave up
Well,
on him pretty quickly.
I mean, said it before, I'm certainly not the first one to say it, and I won't be the last. Like, there was a lot of Kirk Cousin vibes
Hmm.
to the way he played. And it's like, if you can actually develop him into Kirk Cousins, wouldn't you rather have Kirk Cousins and Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably then you're just the Vikings because it's like Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson all over again.
Yeah, but
But
you're also not Minnesota.
I don't know
So,
that yeah, I don't know that I'm taking that risk
yeah,
and like drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. and just being like, we got our quarterback. But like,
yeah,
I don't know. The bust rate on quarterbacks is pretty freaking high, even
yep,
for high level drafted ones. And it's like, why be like, oh, good. Okay, if we draft Jayden Daniels and he bust and sucks, at least we have Marcus Mariota and Jeff Driscoll. We're
yeah.
fine. We're good. We're good now. Like, doesn't make sense to me. But can I give you my super weird? I'm just gonna warn you right now because we haven't had a lot of NFL draft conversations, and we're about to have like 7 in a row in 5 weeks.
Yeah,
My comps are weird.
I like it.
Can I give you a weird comp for Jayden Daniels?
I want it desperately.
Kyler Murray. And
Huh.
what I mean by that, like tall Kyler Murray,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
he's
yeah,
like
yeah.
half a foot taller than Kyler. But
Yeah, it took me a minute to kind of get to where you're coming from, but I think I know where you're going. Go ahead.
well, so my fear with Jayden is that when Kyler is really good, he's fucking awesome.
Hmm.
But every year we go in and say, like, well, how many games can Kyler be good for?
Yep.
Because he gets banged up a lot. So he either gets injured and misses games, or even when he doesn't miss games, he's like tweaked and all that stuff, and he wears down halfway through the season or three quarters of the way through the season.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, the Cardinals were 11 and 0, 10 and 0, whatever it was, before they lost that stupid Thursday night game where AJ Green didn't turn around. Uh,
Turn around.
God, I was so hoping that you were gonna sing that. I was like, God, if he doesn't do it, I have to do it.
One of the best memes I've ever seen. Like ever.
But leading up to that game, Kyler was like, oh, this dude's the MVP. Look at how amazing he's been. He might go for
Yeah.
4,000, 1,000. And I could totally see that being Jayden Daniels' career trajectory
Hmm.
is every year because of how much rushing he's going to do and the shots that he takes. And like you said, I don't know if that's coachable. It
Hmm.
could be, but he's going to take hits. Just like Kyler does a good job of like getting out of bounds and like kind of avoiding hits, but
Hmm.
still gets banged up because he's small. And Jayden Daniels is a lot taller, but is slight and runs. And my worry is that like we're going to get 8 games into a season and he's going to be fucking amazing. And then it's going to be like, oh, he's questionable next week with a calf thing. And then the next week, it's like, oh, yeah, his calf's kind of messed up. And now his knee's also a little banged up. And all of a sudden, he starts dropping off in a
Hmm.
season. So that's where my Kyler Murray comp comes from. Also, because
Yeah.
Kyler throws a good fucking deep ball, but isn't as great in the medium and the short, which is kind of how I see Jayden.
So, like, I saw what I saw on tape, and like, there was a lot that I liked there, but there's always like the other stuff, but like that you can't necessarily see on tape that is like a factor of whether or not they're going to be successful. Um, and JT O'Sullivan having coached him at Elite 11, and saying like that he has a lot of confidence in like the amount of work that he's going to put in, if he's in like a good situation to get coached up and like fix things, um is another reason why like I kind of closed that gap a little bit with Drake May. So like I do think that this is not, with the injury situation, I can definitely see some Kyler Murray stuff. I don't think in terms of, you know, the weeks leading up in between games. I don't think it's going to be a
Yeah.
Kyler Murray situation there. Uh, I think that he like genuinely really cares about this game and like wants to be the best that he can be. Um, and like that's a super important. And it's funny because if you look at what he did over these last 2 years at LSU, I don't think he's Joe Burrow, but it is kind of like a Joe Burrow like path,
My
you
thing
know?
about one of the criticisms of him has been that he had the best supporting cast of any quarterback in this draft. And they're like, oh, this is the same thing they did with Joe Burrow. Is it's like, well, how good is he really? And how good are these
Yeah.
receivers really? Because they all are so good. But
Yeah.
the Joe Burrow thing has made me completely not worry about that at all because
Yeah.
you had Burrow,
Well,
Jefferson, and Chase, and you were like people were like, oh, well, they can't all be good. Someone's responsible for someone else being good. And it's like, no, all three of them are just really fucking good. And when you have three guys on your offense that are that good, they put up these kinds of numbers.
a little bit different situation too, because when Burrow was doing that, he was also like putting up like the most tight window throws in all of college football at that time too. And his completion percentage on those was like something stupid like 70%. They were like very carefully like counted stats that even like proved like no, it's not a lower degree of difficulty. He's just doing insane things.
Yeah. But
Jayden is
what happened with the Burrow thing though is that like Burrow and Chase got credit for being really good, and Justin Jefferson was the one that suffered and fell down the board.
yeah.
And I almost feel like we're looking at the exact same thing in this draft. And like, not to jump into the receivers too much, but you have Jayden Daniels and Malik Neighbors, who are probably both going to be top 7 picks. And then Brian
Mhm.
Thomas Jr. is falling down the board. And I look at Brian Thomas Jr. and I'm like, oh, maybe he shouldn't be falling down the board.
Yeah, seriously.
We'll get there.
He's a dude. Um
It's
yeah, but like
that's the most general draft thing you could say. Like, that guy's a dude.
he's a fucking dude,
I
man.
mean, Kel from Good Burger would tell you that we're all dudes, Matt.
And he's right.
He is. But especially about
Yeah,
Brian Thomas Jr. because he is a dude.
I don't want to like lend credence to the whole like supporting cast deal there. But I mean I do think it's a very different situation from Joe Burrow because the offense that they're running is just so different.
Mm-hmm.
And like the amount of space that Jayden Daniels was throwing to on some of these slot fades is he'll never sniff that in the NFL. It won't be there. Is it possible that they could use slot fades a lot if he ended up in a situation like Washington is not a bad situation for that. But with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, like they can use a lot of that. You can't run it to the degree that they did at LSU, but like you can create an offense that right off the bat uses a lot of stuff that he is comfortable with right away while you develop the other stuff.
Yeah.
But
We
you
we
you got it. You got to have the receivers for it though.
yeah, definitely. I I'm just gonna say this and hurt my own feelings, but Washington is a much better situation for that than New England, right? Like, if he goes to New England, he's using his legs a lot more next season. That's for damn
Yeah.
sure. One other kind of differentiator for me for Drake May versus Jayden Daniels has been that Drake May has a lot more experience playing with his back to the defense. So North Carolina runs a pistol type offense where like play action
Mhm.
fakes. Drake May is fully turning around with his back to the defense and then having to
Yeah.
like whip his whole body around and then read the field to
Mhm.
throw. Where Jayden Daniels has lived in shotgun for years. Um, And one big thing, this one reason this really stands out to me is because when Kyle Shanahan went to the Atlanta Falcons and started working with Matt Ryan had basically lived in shotgun his whole career and was
Hmm.
very uncomfortable with his back to the defense. And Kyle Shanahan's like, dude, we got to get over that because these are all the advantages of being able to play that way and how much better a play fake
Hmm.
is when you're not looking as opposed to when you're in shotgun and you do a play
Yeah.
fake, your eyes are up and you're reading the defense, right? And so
Yep.
people are like, okay, that's a play fake. Like they can read your eyes. Matt Ryan learns and gets comfortable playing with his back to the defense and comes out and has an MVP season, one of the better quarterback seasons
Yeah.
we've ever seen, to be honest. Um,
Yeah.
and it that made all the difference for him. And so, like, especially in New England, with offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt came from the Browns. If you know anything about the Browns and when they were successful, it's running that Kevin Stefanski, Alex Van Pelt, like we're running downhill where
Yep.
quarterback's turning his back to the defense, whipping around and throwing it. So it's not a requirement. You can learn to play with your back to the defense, but it's
Hmm.
something that Jayden Daniels still needs to learn because he's never taken his eyes off the defense in like 5 years in college. And Drake May has that already and does it well.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the reality is too, like as a rookie, you have a shortened off season. This isn't like, oh, we hired this guy in January, he's going to be our OC, and then you get to immediately start working on that.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going to be drafted, in 2 weeks, and they're really not going to even get to start working on that stuff for probably several more weeks because there's a whole lot of stuff for them to get their life set up in a new city. So,
Yeah, there's a lot going on for them. But so
yeah.
we've talked a lot about Drake May and Jayden Daniels. I want to introduce JJ McCarthy to the conversation because we also mentioned like Penix and Bo Nix. We went all the way around and didn't talk about JJ, which in a way is fair because we've talked about JJ on this podcast more than any other prospect so far because I have memed JJ McCarthy to the Patriots into existence.
Yep.
I Last week I made a video on TikTok where I said that JJ McCarthy owes me $1 million because I've increased his draft stock so much just by memeing it. And somebody wrote to me and said, he doesn't know who you are. Get a life. And I said, well, he better fucking learn because he owes me $1 million goddamn dollars. Pay what you owe, JJ. We've gone back and forth and over and under and to grandma's house and back on the JJ McCarthy debate. This is where I've officially landed. I will not entertain spending a top 10 pick on JJ McCarthy. I will not. If the Patriots do it, I am out. I understand the athletic QB upside with the strong arm. Like I understand the upside of JJ McCarthy. I know that some of the film is tantalizing. I've seen the plays. My concerns, I'm not even going to sit here and talk about the lack of film, right? I've beat that to death. We've
Yeah.
talked about, he wasn't asked to do a lot at Michigan. There's not a lot of film. He didn't throw as many passes.
Yeah.
We can go off on that for days. I'm going to talk about what's on film and what I saw that concerns me. He is what we call a one speed thrower. And that speed is fast. And somewhere my dad is sitting, he's either at the gym or he's in the car, whatever he's doing, he's saying, tell me how I throw, boys. Fast. And I kind of mentioned this earlier is that like when I watch him, I feel like he doesn't have a feel for playing quarterback right now. Could that be because he doesn't have the reps and he's very green and doesn't have the experience? It absolutely could be.
And I would argue that Occam's razor suggests that is most
Yeah,
likely it.
no, it 100% could be.
Yeah.
But my question on JJ McCarthy is, what pick are you willing to spend to find the answer to that question?
Yeah.
And to me, it's not in the top 10.
Right. Well,
It's not.
that's the thing is like we're talking about like different things that we're seeing, but it's the same exact question for Jayden Daniels. We're talking about potentially spending a number 2 overall pick on a guy who has 0 production throwing in the middle of the field, which is where most of your throws will be in the NFL. Like that is a major question. So like again, it comes back to that question of like, are you not doing it because you're just not being asked because that's your team has come up with a way to win without asking you to do it, or are you not doing it just because you can't? And with JJ, it's like all of the data that we have about Jim Harbaugh says this has nothing to do with JJ. Like,
To be fair to JJ, Jim Harbaugh got to the NFL and got Justin Herbert, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Was like, you know what, we're gonna run the shit out of this ball.
We need Greg Roman. We're gonna cut Mike Williams and we're gonna trade Keenan Allen.
He's just like, you're not throwing. Did you see what Jim Harbaugh did this week?
Oh God,
or John?
no.
Which one? Okay, yeah, it's Jim. It's Jim.
Yeah.
I always mess this up. My goal for this podcast was to get through the whole thing without fucking up anybody's name. And now here I am confusing the Harbaughs. J. Period Harbaugh, the one in the Chargers, organized every player's locker by number and put their high school recruiting ranking on all of their lockers this week.
Fuck.
Yeah. What's going to go over well in the NFL is treating these guys like college freshmen and not throwing the ball with Justin Herbert, who has one of the best arms in the NFL. And just like not even just not throwing it, but like actively saying, fuck passing.
Yeah.
We're running with Gus Edwards.
That shit's gonna be a real tough sell when they start 2-5. That was I guess it didn't surprise me because we knew it was coming, but it's like, Jim, you had to know how much you had it made in college. Like, you cannot use these stupid tactics with grown ass men. Like, you're going to have guys on your roster who've been in the league for like 8 to 10 years.
The whole thing with Harbaugh is that like he is very successful almost everywhere he goes, but just eventually starts rubbing people the wrong way.
Yeah.
I'm like, he said, fuck you. He's going to rub people the wrong way from day one. But the thing I think is funny about JJ McCarthy is so the way I have my quarterback tiers is like, I have Caleb Williams, a gap, and then Drake Maye. A lot of people, the way they have that tier going after that is that there's, like you said, like Jayden Daniels is close, right?
Yeah.
To Drake Maye. I don't have it as close. And I have kind of JJ McCarthy and Jayden Daniels a little closer to each other. Like, I would not spend pick 2 or 3 on Jayden Daniels. I would draft him 9 or 10. McCarthy, I maybe when I get closer to 20, I'm a little bit more comfortable. But my thing about Jayden Daniels versus JJ McCarthy is that, like, I almost have the opposite concerns about JJ McCarthy than I do about Jayden Daniels. With Daniels, I'm like, okay, the deep ball is good, but the short and the intermediate stuff, I don't know. McCarthy, I'm like, I know this guy can whip it in there.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know that he can't whip it in there, if that makes sense. Like, I was watching everybody goes like, well, watch the Alabama game. I'm like, okay, I watched the Alabama. I watched it live, and I've watched every JJ McCarthy throw from the Alabama game. And the only thing I can think of is that, like, he fucking hates Roman Wilson and was trying to murder him, because Roman Wilson is running these 5-yard slants and JJ McCarthy is like throwing it in there like he's Randy goddamn Johnson. And I'm like, I need to see the touch. I need you to
Yeah.
throw a catchable
And
ball. I want to see you like loft it in. I know you can do the tight window throws, and
right.
that's great, but I want to see you loft it to the intermediate. I want to see you like loft that dig. I want like when it's needed, just like dip it, like just put it over the
And
linebacker and like dip it in there.
I do agree that that is a critique of his game. I also want to point out who else we both appreciate their game that has been a criticism of at other points in their career, and that was one John Matthew Stafford. So
When you said John, I didn't know where you were going. I was like, he's gonna say Matt Stafford.
yeah, that's the thing. Like people forget his first name is actually John.
I forgot about that. I did forget that. That's a good example of people forgetting that, is that I forgot that. But the thing about Matt Stafford is he always had the deep ball and he had accuracy,
Yeah.
but it was,
Well,
I don't know
well,
about JJ McCarthy's
but
deep
that
accuracy.
also it's like, okay, Stafford played at Georgia and they're like, okay, you're the offense, right? Like he had like 3 years to develop that shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I like we've established what the question is with JJ, right? So like you all have to come up with your own individual answer there. If I had to make a pick, I can't honestly say with great confidence where I would take him. Um, However, I try to like come back to like some reality, like, okay, well, let's look where guys have actually been drafted as quarterbacks in the past in the NFL. And if I take a look at what I have seen from JJ just this past year, because I think that's really the best year to really look at him. Um, and like you really do have to watch like at least 10 games to have like a good like sample size to like get an idea of what he does well. Because he just doesn't throw it enough. Like, and then I compare him as a prospect to like Kenny Pickett coming out. Well, I'm definitively taking him before Kenny Pickett would have won, right? So like I definitely get where you're coming from on like maybe around 20, but when I look at it through that lens, it's like okay, so there's got to be a gap there for me if we're looking at it from that angle. So I don't know, maybe somewhere between 10 and 15. But the reality is that quarterbacks go high.
Yeah. Well,
So
I think with him too, the thing we didn't mention, and the thing that if Clint's listening to this, he's gonna turn this shit off right now, is that the I think the intangibles with him are the most unquestionable of any quarterback
well,
in the draft. Like he's
yeah,
a winner, and by all accounts, he's a leader, right?
yeah. And also like he is a fucking gamer. Some of these other quarterbacks, like, that's not necessarily answered yet.
Hmm.
But like I know they didn't have him throw the ball a lot in that Penn State game, but like he was clearly hurt in that game and he gutted that game out. I think like that's huge. What we saw, um, basically like the Ohio State game through the national championship, like we saw JJ McCarthy maybe not throwing a ton of passes, but a lot of the series that we saw was run, run. Oh shit, it's third and long. Hey, JJ, go get it. Oh, okay, he picked up the third and long. It was one of those things where like the more I watched him, the more I liked his game because while I definitely saw a lot of throws like early on in games where I'm like, okay, like you just look like you're not in sync or what. Like, you don't look like you've played a lot of football. And that's honestly definitively true of him. Like, he hasn't thrown a ton of passes in college. But
So what I was going to say
like,
is that the more you watch him, the more you like him because you have to watch him a lot to see enough passes to
yeah,
understand what he does well.
but like, man, it's one of those things where like when he's put in tough situations, like he gets it done. I mean,
I mean, look no further than the Alabama game that I previously mentioned. They do the flea flicker that's thrown behind him. He
yeah,
does like the spin move, gets it. He's got the edge rusher right in his face. He whips it downfield. Like,
yeah.
if you put together a JJ McCarthy highlight tape, you could convince me that he's QB1, right? But you got to look at all the bad stuff too.
3rd and 10 plus this year. He had 22 attempts. Again, probably less than everyone else here in this
Yeah,
class,
but
right?
also like how many
But
times was Michigan in 3rd and 10 plus this year
exactly,
with that
yeah,
run game?
right. He gets a first down on 12 of those. That's over half, which is like an insanely good rate on 3rd and 10 plus. Uh, on fourth downs, just in general on fourth downs, like that, you're really risking it there. I mean, 8 attempts this year, he converts 7 first downs, right? Like, he's when he's been given the opportunity, he's been a money player for his team.
Hmm.
And that's kind of like bolstered some of it for me. But I still am in that place where it's like, I don't know. Like, I like this trait. Like, I that's important, I think. But I'm struggling with like, is that enough for me to trust that you can get yourself in position to be able to capitalize on that in the NFL? Honestly, like, a lot of that's just going to come down to where he lands, I think. Like, he's going to have to land somewhere that is either going to give him a year to like get coached up, or he's going to have to land somewhere that is going to have a very specific plan for him while he gets the reps, because he needs the reps. Um, he's got the physical upside. And like, also, with the whole like, okay, he throws one speed thing. Yeah, you know how quarterbacks learn that lesson? By throwing lots of passes.
Yeah. Well,
So
I do think that the Vikings would be a good spot for him. One, because the Vikings are the best landing spot for any quarterback because you get Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and a coaching staff that wants to throw the ball.
yeah.
Um, and I think that with the intangible stuff, people really like him, and I think he
Hmm.
he probably will go top 10 in this draft. I
Yeah.
think that a quarterback hungry team, it could be like the Vikings, it could be like the Giants, who are looking for a replacement for Daniel Jones. Let Daniel Jones and Drew Lock take it for a year, and then he starts next
Hmm.
year. I think he will go higher than I would take him. It's just an incredibly huge risk. And I'm going to come back on the show, the post draft show, and just be like, this is the riskiest pick in the draft because the variance band is the highest of any quarterback in the draft. Like, he could be really
Yeah.
good. He could be really bad.
Yeah.
What pick are you going to spend to find out? I want to give you a positive about him by asking you a question, and then I want to give you a weird comp that you're not going to like.
Okay.
My question: who was the last Michigan quarterback to beat Ohio State twice?
Was it Brady?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to
Yeah,
that
I don't
question.
know. Yeah.
So I looked it up. It's not Chad Henne. I was trying to look it up while you were giving your JJ
No,
McCarthy
no,
breakdown, and I can't
because
find it.
Lloyd Carr had that like really bad record.
Chad Henne was 0-4
Yeah.
It
against Ohio State.
it
Yeah.
might have been Tom, but like Tom wasn't a specifically good quarterback at Michigan, and he didn't.
No.
I don't even know if he played twice against Ohio State.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just saying that's a positive for JJ McCarthy is like that's the game in college football. He won it twice by a lot.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, whoever the last Michigan quarterback was to beat Ohio State twice, he did not beat Ohio State by the same margin that JJ McCarthy did twice.
Yeah.
See it.
Well, and I mean, he beat CJ Stroud. I
He also
know.
beat Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
Damn sure didn't beat Cal McCord. Cal McCord just beats himself.
Yeah. Nobody beats Kyle McCord except for Kyle McCord.
Have fun. Have fun in Syracuse. All right. Weird comp. And you are not going to like this one because I know how you feel about this guy. Alex Smith. I could see like, we're talking about the variance band being this huge
Yeah.
thing where it's like he could be so good, he could be so bad. I think like a likely outcome for him is being Alex Smith. And Alex Smith, mobile quarterback, made good plays with his legs, really good in the short game and in the intermediate game, not as good in the deep game. And was a guy who, like, when he was playing in a good offense, like when he was in Kansas City, he was really good. He played like in the flow of the offense. He played, didn't have to do too many broken plays or like off timing plays. He played very well. And that's one of JJ McCarthy's strengths is like playing within the structure and the timing of the offense. He's very good at doing that.
Yeah.
But when you're like, okay, Alex Smith, you need to go win us a game, that's when things went downhill for him. It's like, okay, Alex, we're down 14. We need to go score and we're putting the game on your shoulders. That is when you did not want Alex Smith. And I could see JJ McCarthy being that type of player is like when things are going good, you're like, damn, JJ McCarthy, like, yeah, that Adam guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But then when JJ McCarthy's down 10 in the fourth quarter, you're like, oh man, Adam, that guy knows what he's talking about.
I mean, my counterpoint to that is that what we saw in JJ's last 3 games is that at the end of the game is when he's going to turn it on, right? He may not like hero ball you for 4 quarters, right? He may not be like, hey, I'm going to go out and throw for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns today. If he needs to make a play to win your team a game, like that's what we were just talking about, right? Like he has already been doing that. So
I'll adjust the comp to slightly more clutch Alex Smith.
Yeah, well, and I think if Alex Smith had been more of a playmaker, I wouldn't have had such a harsh take on him. Because that was my thing.
Can I just say that like every quarterback I'm throwing out, I like Alex Smith. I like Kyler Murray. I'm going to give you a Caleb Williams comp next week that's going to blow your goddamn mind.
So
it's another guy I like though.
My problem with Alex Smith, and you know this, has always been like, if you are a game manager, you had better damn near never make a mistake, right? And there are those who might sit here and like throw the game manager title on like Jared Goff because of the play style. What I mean by game manager is like you are never the guy who like makes the play. You are not ever the rising tide that is floating the boats. That is floating the boats of your offense. He was truly like just kind of a trigger man for them. And when it came down to it, like you just said, like he was never able to like be the guy and get it done for his team. Like, hey, sometimes you're surrounded by enough talent that you don't necessarily need that, but like those are pretty rare situations. I think that if someone is showing that like clutch gene in college, that is one of the things that they have the athletic ability, usually probably translates to the next level.
When Alex Smith was a junior, Utah went 12-0. Just going to throw that out there. Is that Alex Smith in college is a different player than Alex Smith in the NFL, and JJ McCarthy in college may be a different player than JJ McCarthy in the NFL.
Yeah, he'll
It's
probably
just
throw the ball more.
God, I would hope so. Probably not if he gets drafted to the Chargers, though. Probably
Yeah,
throw the ball
probably.
less.
Yeah. It's it's funny because there are people who are sitting there thinking like, oh, well, the Chargers just got rid of their top two wide receivers. They're probably going to take a receiver at 5. They are taking Joe Alt. Pencil that in right
Mm.
fucking now.
Pencil it in with pen.
Well, and then go over it with permanent marker, then paint.
Put it on the board. All right. So that was 60 minutes on quarterbacks.
Yep.
Which I warned everybody. I was like, this is gonna be an 80-minute podcast, and 70
I
minutes of it
I
is
warned you like 2 weeks ago on
no.
that.
I was like, I showed Matt the agenda, and I was like, do you want to put more on the agenda? And he's like, no, that's good. And I was like, we got 2 things. He's like, yeah, no, it's gonna be 60 minutes about quarterbacks and 15 minutes about all else. So this is, like I said, the best receiver class that we've had in forever. I was very curious. So I went back and looked up what the best receiver class ever actually was. Do you know what year it was? I didn't know this.
No.
The best receiver class ever is 1996, the draft class.
How is this measured?
Just let me read you the names and you'll
Okay.
agree. Terrell Owens, Marvin Harrison, Mushin Muhammad, Keyshawn Johnson, Eric Moulds, Amani Toomer, Terry Glenn, Joe Horn, amongst others. You know who's underrated as fuck?
Most of those guys.
Mushin goddamn Muhammad. 35th all time in receiving yards. Only 500 less receiving yards than Michael Irvin in his career. He had a 1,600 yard, 17 touchdown season in Carolina.
Yeah.
Lost the Super Bowl to the Patriots. 4 of the top 50 receivers all time in terms of receiving yards came from the 1996 draft class.
Yeah.
Including Terrell Owens and Marvin Harrison, who are 2 of the best to ever do it.
Yeah.
So the only other argument I would accept is whatever draft class Jerry Rice was in, it just be like it had Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
Nobody else there was no other receivers drafted, and that was still the best draft class. But 1996, pretty damn good. So I see this class as being pretty similar to the quarterback class. And actually, there are a lot of people who now disagree with this, which might be another classic case of we've spent too much time with this prospect. But I see it as like there's Marvin Harrison Jr. And then there's everybody else.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're on the same page. I've seen people put Malik Neighbors ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. And I'm like, you guys have just been looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. too long because he's another guy that like for 3 years we've been like, this is the dude.
I have harsh words for those people.
Yeah.
Very harsh words as you'll understand when we get into this. So
yeah. Well, I just like it was the same thing with quarterbacks where it was for a couple years, it was like, dude, this guy is the dude. He's a generational receiver prospect. He's one of the most like refined best receiver prospects we've ever seen come out. And then now people are like, oh, kind of like Malik Neighbors more. No. There's a very clear tier of players in this. It's like, God damn it. It's Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake Maye, and then there's the rest of the draft class. But So anyway, this is the same kind of situation. We know who wide receiver 1 should be. Wide receiver 2, there's a debate. On one hand, we have Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver from LSU, and we have Rome Odunze, the wide receiver from Washington. I'm going to ask you the same question, Matt. You're on the clock. You want a receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr. is gone.
Yep.
Who are you drafting?
Rome. It's definitely Rome.
Much more definitive than the quarterback.
Yeah.
Thing.
I mean, maybe it changes depending on your team makeup or who you have, but like the way I see it, Rome is an extremely clean prospect here. He's not perfect, but like the size, strength, the production, like really what it is for me is I look at Malik Neighbors and I watch him play, and he does great in the slot where he's able to be off the ball and nobody gets to get their hands on him. When he was put on the outside and had to deal with press coverage against some of the better corners in this conference, he didn't do a lot. It's not that I don't believe that he can learn to do those things. But I don't necessarily believe that he'll ever be like super great at it. Rome is going to win when you try to get physical with him because he's big, strong, fast, and is just going to fucking bully you. Malik, I think, is going to be best playing out of the slot. And I think that can be an incredibly dangerous weapon in your team's arsenal. But, like, if you're going to ask me which of these two guys in the first 3 years of their career could potentially, like, be a top 10 wide receiver, like, I think Rome is a far better bet for that than Malik. I think he's just got a wider skill set, and it's not like the level of proficiency in those skills is necessarily less.
So this one was really difficult for me because I just think these guys are extremely different flavors of prospect.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, and you kind of mentioned this, but it really just depends on what you want. Like, I'm not going to say who's who, but one guy is vanilla and the other guy's chocolate, right? Like, they're kind of polar opposites where Malik Neighbors is a little bit smaller. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's extremely fast. He ran a 4.35. But more importantly, he's very sudden on the football field. Like, he's just one of those guys where he has that Tyreek Hill quality. I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill. I'm not going to go full Van Lathan and be like, he's the next Tyreek Hill.
I mean, for his loved one's sake, hopefully he's not.
Oh, God. But he has that quality of, like, anytime he touches the ball, he could just be gone.
Yeah.
And
no, and that's like one of the areas where like he has like a clear edge to me. Not that like I don't think Rome has good yak ability, but I think you could argue that Malik Neighbors is the biggest yak threat in this entire class.
Yeah, and it's not even just like the yards after catch of like, because like Rome is going to catch it and be physical with people and gain more yards. Like, he's going to be that guy that you throw to on 3rd and 5 and you're 2 yards short of the sticks, and all of a sudden he's like banging into dudes and picking up those extra couple of yards.
But Malik, Neighbors is, you might see him make 3 dudes just miss entirely.
Yeah, he has that Tyreek Hill quality of like he's going to catch a 5-yard slant and house it with nobody touching him because he's just so fast and he's so sudden. The release package worries me. He has a lot of wasted movement at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
My biggest concern with Malik Neighbors, though, is like, and it kind of plays into the release package thing. I feel like he won a lot in college just because he was fast and sudden.
Yeah.
Like he's just more athletic than other guys, and that let him win. And you don't
Hmm.
get that advantage at the next level. Like, and I know he played in the SEC, and people are gonna be like, "Oh, it's the best conference. He played in the SEC. What are you talking about?" But they're still college athletes.
Hmm.
They're not all going to be, even all the guys in Alabama are not all going to be starters in the NFL. Now you're going up against all starters in the NFL. It's a different breed. You can't just beat them with athleticism. You have to use technique. And that's where we flip over to Rome Odunze, who the technique is like, I love it. I love a technician,
Yeah.
right? He's a big body guy, 6'3, 212. Ready for a weird comp?
Go for it.
Short Mike Evans. Mike Evans is 6'5. It's not like he's that much taller, but I see Rome as like Mike Evans is not running away from dudes after he catches the ball.
Yeah.
But when the ball's up in the air, Mike Evans is going to beat you. He's going to come down with it and he can generate big plays that way. And I see Rome as more that type of guy. He's kind of more like possession receiver-y. I don't mean it in a bad way. I feel like
No.
people are like, look at possession receiver and be like, oh, that's it. But he's like a high level possession receiver,
Yeah.
great ball skills, very fluid, especially for his size as an
Hmm.
athlete. But he, the knock on him is he just doesn't have that gear that Malik Neighbors has. Like he ran a four 5 something like that.
Yeah.
Which I'm not a huge like combine measurables guy, but like he just doesn't have that like extra gear to like really break away from guys in the NFL. So he has to win with like size and technique,
Hmm.
which are things you can win with in the NFL. Mike Evans has been amazing, and that's why I look at Rome and I'm like, oh yeah, slightly shorter
Yeah.
Mike Evans. I like it.
Well, and I should have written it down, the exact stat, but I think I remember hearing that Rome's contested catch rate, like winning the contested catch, is something stupid like 80%, which sure, you can expect that to kind of regress to the mean a little bit in the NFL, but he's gonna win more than 50% of those in the
Yeah.
NFL. It's not gonna go back that much.
The thing that's concerning to me about that is that's his superpower, right? Like that's one of the things he's really good at.
Hmm.
It kind of depends where he goes, like
You got to
how
have a
much
good
we're gonna
quarterback to be able to
and you
utilize it.
you got to have
Yeah.
one that trusts you too. Like I
Yeah.
think about Kenny Galladay.
Yep. He is the poster child for
Oh,
this.
when he was in Detroit and Matt Stafford was like, "Yeah, I'll put it up for you. Like I trust you. I'm gonna put it in a good spot for you." He was awesome. And then he goes to New York where he has shit quarterback play and just completely falls off a cliff. And everybody's like, what happened to Kenny Galladay? And we're sitting here, we're like, nothing happened to Kenny Galladay. He's the exact same player. He has a shitty quarterback. And like Rome is going to be better than Kenny Galladay at the next level. It's just an example because Rome does other things a lot better than Kenny Galladay does. Uh, but like if Rome Odunze gets drafted by the Giants, I'm like, oh man, why are we? It's like Drake London's another good example.
Yeah.
It's like they put Drake London with Marcus Mariota and Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ritter, and it's everybody's
Yeah.
like, God, Drake London sucks. It's like, no, Drake London's pretty good,
Yeah.
and just
Quite good.
wait till you see him with Kirk Cousins this
Yeah.
year. It's going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Rome's a little bit more quarterback dependent,
Mm.
where Malik is like, you kind of put him with anybody that can throw a 5 yard slant, and you're going to see him be productive, like not as productive as if he's with a good quarterback, but he can kind of make plays on his own a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
God, Kenny Galladay, since leaving the Lions, how many touchdowns do you think he has?
is it, is it more than zero? I'm gonna go with three.
One.
Oh, I was gonna
He
go.
wa-
I was gonna go
he got
zero.
he got one He got one in 2022.
My boy left Detroit, got the fucking bag.
And then just disappeared.
He Jacoby Ellsbury'd it. Jacoby Ellsbury, amazing for the Red Sox, got the bag from the Yankees and was
Yeah.
fucking awful. And that's why he's my favorite player ever. Not really, but my comp for neighbors, people keep saying Tyreek Hill, and it fucking pisses me off because it's like saying that someone is like Steph Curry. Like,
Yeah.
as much as I hate Tyreek Hill, there can only be one.
There's only one.
There can only be one. I said more like a Jalen Waddle or a Hollywood Brown.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
explosive, but is it going to be consistent enough for
Right.
him to be really good?
And that's the thing is that he's going to have to learn how to beat press in order to be closer to Jalen Waddle than Hollywood Brown.
Yep. I want to throw another log on the fire here for who should be wide receiver too. Can we talk about Brian Thomas Jr. real quick?
I fucking knew it.
Ah, if Romo Dunze and Malik Neighbors are vanilla and chocolate, Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of the swirl, right? Like he's six. I've seen him listed at like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", different places. He's a little taller. Ran a 4.33 at LSU's pro day. So I don't know how accurate that is, but I see in a lot of mocks, it's like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Romo Dunze are all top 5 or top 10 picks. And then Brian Thomas Jr. is consistently going in the 20s. And I'm just like, I don't think the gap between Rome and Malik and Brian Thomas is that big. I don't see it as being 10 picks, right? Like he led the NCAA in
No.
touchdowns last year with 17 at LSU. He's a red zone threat. He's like really the kind of perfect proverbial deep threat where he's got that like long speed and he's big so he can go and win contested catches.
Yeah.
The part of his scouting report that really stood out to me is flashy and snappy route running, especially on like
Yeah.
digs and stuff. The one thing he really struggles with is routes where he has to come back to the quarterback.
hmm
There's something he needs to work on, but I think a lot of the stuff is there. Um, and the measurables are good. The other guy I wanted to mention, and I'm going to mess up his name, and I don't want to mess up his name because I have done so good this podcast, except for the Harbaugh thing. Uh, Adonai Mitchell,
Yeah.
Texas. I just want to throw him out because he got a 9.99 raw athletic score
hmm
from Math Bomb. Like he was the highest ranked
And
receiver at
he
9.99.
has some really good tape too.
Mm-hmm. Diva though. If
Oh
you watch
yeah.
the Texas versus Washington game, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, ugh,
Well, yeah,
we'll see.
yeah. I mean, oh, the comp that a lot of people throw around for him, both like on tape and like personality wise, is George Pickens. Um,
That's a good one.
yeah, there's a little bit of smoke there. And like I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I would love to have George Pickens on the Lions. Um, he was definitely a my guy for me. It, he's definitely an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Matt kind of mentioned this earlier, but we were having a slight debate through text today about where Stephon Diggs ranks in the hierarchy of top 15 to 20 wide receivers in the NFL. And I did a list of like guys I would 100% take over Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
And I knew that some of them you were going to fight me on, but I put Pickens on that list. It's like, Matt's not going to fucking fight me on Pickens at all. He's going to be like, that's a good pick. Good
No,
pick, Adam.
number one overall.
Absolutely. What do you, just real quick before we do our last thing and then sign off? Are you with me on the Brian Thomas Jr. thing? Do you think like,
No, I love him. I think
hmm,
he's awesome.
I like him too. And I didn't answer my own question. You said Romo Dunze
Yeah.
number 2 wide receiver. So I went into doing my research and watching all this tape thinking I was going to pick Romo Dunze because throughout the um, college football season, I keep a list of players on my phone for the My Guys podcast. And I'm like, these are just
Hmm.
guys I like and want to look into more. And Romo Dunze was on that list from early in the season.
Yeah.
So I went in thinking I was going to pick Rome, and I came out picking Rome. That was the mislead right there. But I did go back and forth. I went in thinking I was going to pick Rome, and then I switched to Neighbors, and then by the end of it, I switched back to Rome. So I do
Yeah.
I do agree with you, but that was my
And
thing is like they're very different flavors of prospect, and it kind of I could see why people would be like I like Neighbors more.
yeah, and look, I was maybe a little bit harsh on him, but the reality is too, like if I am a team that has uh you know three guys that I think are really solid outside wide receivers, I'm probably gonna take Neighbors, right? Because that's that's really setting him up for success.
Right.
Is
Well, like
they're
if you were Chicago with Chicago's second pick, which I think is like 9,
yeah,
you might lean more towards Neighbors, right? But if you were
yeah.
like the Giants looking for a number 1 receiver, you'd probably go Rome.
Yeah, but I could also see Chicago picking Neighbors and then being dumb enough to fucking stick him outside. So
That's true. They're like Keenan Allen, you're a slot receiver now. It's like no, you guys missed the whole thing. Um, real quick before we sign off, uh, what pick do the Lions have?
29.
Wow, it's like the late. When was the last? Oh, I guess you guys had the Rams pick where you had the last pick in the first round recently, but
Yeah.
um, who
It's been a long time since anything that well, yeah, like it's been like since the 50s since we've had anything that would have been,
on
anywhere
your
close to the
own?
last, yeah, on our
Uh,
own, yeah.
who's your target or targets for the Lions in this draft?
So, my dream pick, which up until recently, honestly, I didn't think was a realistic possibility, but there have been some rumors of maybe some teams not necessarily liking his medical so much, that have kind of had him maybe dropping down some boards a little bit. Uh, I am all about Jackson Powers Johnson.
Mm,
That is my fucking dude. I firmly believe that he is going to come out of this draft being the best offensive lineman drafted.
I have a feeling we're gonna have an in-depth breakdown of this gentleman next
Yeah.
week.
And like specifically for the Lions, like I think it's super easy to look at the depth chart and say there's not really a huge need there. They've got starters at all three interior offensive lineman position, but uh I mean they they signed a dude for a 1 year deal and Graham Glasgow, while I love him, like look at the end of the day, interior offensive linemen, backup interior offensive linemen have played a lot for the Lions. And we need an heir apparent to Frank Ragnow. The the talks have been that toe that he periodically misses games for will need to be amputated when he retires. I don't think he's going to play many more years. I think we might get one at most 2 years out of him. Uh, so getting a guy who could be an all-pro guard or center that can learn from Frank Ragnow, who is probably the best center in the NFL now that Kelsey is gone. Like, yeah, sign me up for that.
Hmm.
And if he's not available, my runner-up for that is I think Cooper DeJean would fit very well in our defense. And I think I think he'll bring a lot of value with the new kickoff rules.
Both good picks. So the Patriots are drafting much higher than the Lions. We have the third pick.
The tables have turned.
I think it's pretty obvious from this podcast. The dream pick for me is Drake Maye. I'm all in on Drake Maye. If Washington, it sounds like Washington's going to draft Jayden Daniels. That's all I know it's all smoke screen season right now, but that's where things are leaning. And I called it out way earlier in the year that I thought it was going to happen, especially because it's Washington and they got a new owner and he's flashy and whatever. Dream pick is Drake Maye. I'm all in on the Drake Maye thing.
And also, if I'm remembering correctly, who Washington's new offensive coordinator is, that offense that Jayden is coming from is kind of up his alley anyways.
Air raid time, baby. So my dream pick is Drake Maye. That's who I'm rooting for at 3. If Drake Maye is not there, I actually want to take Marvin Harrison Jr. The way that I have my board laid out right now is Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake Maye. And I think that there's for 2 years now, we've been saying it, that this is like the elite crust of prospects right here. Caleb Williams is a special quarterback. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a generational wide receiver prospect. Drake Maye is a quarterback who would be the first overall pick in almost any other draft. And the only reason he's not is because Caleb Williams is just that damn good.
Yeah.
So I would pass on Jayden Daniels and take Marvin Harrison Jr. and we'll figure out the quarterback thing later, which I know is that's a pretty big thing to figure out, but Marvin Harrison Jr. helps you figure that out.
Yeah.
I'd be fine though if they did draft Jayden Daniels. I'll be okay. I'm not going to come back on here and be like, oh, God, I can't believe we did that. If we draft JJ McCarthy, I will come back on here and just be very upset. And if we take this goddamn Vikings thing where it's 11-23 and a future first, I will just be completely out on this team. I might stop podcasting. I might not be able to do the draft episodes with you anymore. I'd be like, on to the NBA.
It would almost be better to get other years' first round picks than next year's.
Yeah, I just can't. If that's all we get, if they were here's 11-23 and 3 future first, I'd be like, okay, I get why you guys did it. Or if they threw Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison or someone in there, then that kind of changes things. But if it's just 11-23 and next year's first, I will die, probably live on the broadcast of the NFL draft.
Yeah, if you can get Jordan Addison in that deal, then we can start talking.
Yeah, that maybe changes things, but that's the dream. I'm rooting for Drake Maye. My fingers are crossed for Drake Maye. But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. Whether you want to or not is up to you. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Been having a lot of fun with people in my comment section the last couple of weeks. People are mean on the internet.
Yeah.
I'm mean back to them. So go check, even if you don't want to watch the video, just go check out the comment section. It's kind of lit. And you can email us, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. We really appreciate you guys listening and look forward to hearing from you. You want to talk about the draft? If you want to talk about the women's college basketball national championship, hit me up. I got a lot of thoughts on both. Next week, Thursday, Matt and I will be back with our My Guys podcast.
Yep.
I started putting together the My Guys All-Star team. It's not done yet, but I just want to give you guys a teaser for next week. Matt, we're really fucking good at picking defensive backs. Devon Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, Javon Holland, Brian Branch, Jalen Petrie, Jaquan Brisker. I'm looking at the thing right now and the guys that I've already written down. I'm like, this is it's kind of ridiculous, our hit rate on the My Guys podcast. I'm just going to throw it out there. that like we've done 3 of them and I can make an all-star team. A good one.
Yeah, well, it's like it. I think a lot of it comes down to it's like, yeah, we all have like a lot of guys every year in the draft that we like, but like the my guys are the ones that like you are certain on. We are pounding the table for.
I
So like,
I cheated for next week. my first my guy, people are just gonna be like, "Oh, come the fuck on! You can't pick that guy." I'm like, I did because
yeah,
he's been my guy for 3 years. So I'm taking it. I'm taking my victory lap here. I know 2 of yours already, just from talking to you on the podcast, and we'll find out who the other 4 are because Matt and I are both gonna bring 3 to talk about in a little bit more detail, and then 3 quick hitters like we do every season.
yeah,
So I'm looking forward to that. I was looking forward to this. I was kind of dying to talk draft stuff with you, and I tried to save it all for the podcast. And I'm going to try to not reveal the my guys before we get to next week. Or maybe we should, so we don't have any overlap. We'll figure that out this week. But
yeah. Well, we'll figure it out.
yeah, until then, there's NBA season's winding down, NHL season's winding down. We're getting ready for the playoffs, so that is exciting. And then Matt and I will see you guys next week to talk more draft.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys.
Don't be fooled by the Timberwolves.
That's it. Yeah, it's probably a good call unless they play the Kings. All right. Bye, guys.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye, Mom.
Bye, Robin.